and welcome to Empower TV. We're going to get started in a minute. Tonight we are doing a reading of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And there is also, during intermission, going to be a giveaway. If you're having a fabulous holiday, drop it in the chat what you did. There we go. Before we start the read, and during intermission, we'll get to the giveaway. Oh. If you're lurking, exclamation point lurk. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea which shall not put my readers out of humor with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. Their faithful friend and servant, C.D., 1843. Stave 1. Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's nom was good upon change for anything. He chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the smile. In my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners, for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legati, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story. I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his own rampart than there would be in any other middle aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot, say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterward, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people knew to call the business Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, a squeezing, retching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows. In his wiry chin he carried his own low temperature always about him. He iced his office in the dog days and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew his bittered than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, no pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him. In only one respect, they often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. The edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones call nuts to Scrooge. Once upon, once upon a time of all the good days in the year on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breast, and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring office, like ruddy smears upon the pallid brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole. It was so dense without that, although the court was of the narrowest, the house opposite were mere phantoms to see, the dingy cloud come dropping down, obscuring everything. One might thought that nature lived hard by and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond a sort of tank was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very small. But the clerk's fire was so very much smaller, and it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. And so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself with rapid walk, in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle?" said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I am sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said "Bah!" again, and followed it up with a "Humbug!" "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be," returned the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item through a round dozen of months presented dead against you?" "If I could work more my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it!" Scrooge repeated his nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone then," said Scrooge. "Much good may it do you, much good it has ever done you. There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited." "I dare say," returned the nephew, "Christmas among the rest, but I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it comes round, apart from the veneration due its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be taught from that as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of, in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem to be one consent, to open their shut up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, I say. God bless it. The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded, becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety. He poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go into Parliament. And don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in the extremity first. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love," growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel, to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge, "and a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding he stopped at the outer door to bestow the greeting of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge. Who overheard him? "My clerk, with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I retire to Bedlam." This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe," said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years," Scrooge replied. "He died 7 years ago this very night." "We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner," said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word liberality. Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back. At his festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the Union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? Uh, they are still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Uh, Under the impression that they scarcely furnished Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, this is my answer. I don't want merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I hope to support the establishments I have mentioned. The cost enough. And those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know it, observed the gentleman. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's mind occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring lamps. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's mind. Occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than we usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened, so that people ran about with flaring lamps, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations. Afterward, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head, up there. So we're going to take a brief intermission. Okay, so we know we're on intermission. So I'll just switch back to this one because I know my headset mic is connected to this page for sure. So the movie quote again is, to deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. Someone has to know what that's from. What movie? Somebody has to know what movie that's from. Are you all looking it up? So to deny our impulses is the very thing to deny that we are human. I have to relook at the quote. I didn't memorize it. And it is for an ENG, Empowered Network Group, charcoal mask, which is the bomb. Always do a test on your skin, of course. So we have someone whoever can guess that. I'm going to go back to reading. So I'll drop that in my Discord. Make sure everybody got that. And then we also have a t-shirt to give away tonight too. But I only have small, medium, and large, and I forgot that they are the ladies' shirts. So I had to get some things for the guys. So tomorrow's giveaway will be for the guys. You guys can join me for pancakes in the giveaway, which is the pain relief cream. So, but tonight is a charcoal mask. If you can guess, drop it in the chat what movie that is from. And again, the movie quote, and I'll drop it in here. Here, let me get the quote. So I don't want to, let me see here. Hopefully it doesn't. So what is this? Let me see, So to deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. So what movie is this line from? To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. And I chose a hard one. Well-known movie, but a hard quote. And we'll play movie trivia. So we'll do movie trivia tomorrow. Maybe we'll just give away a bunch of stuff from Morning Cup of Joe. That's what I'm thinking we're going to do because it seems very difficult. So what movie is this from? What line? I'm going to see, can I copy it? Nah. I should have did it before I sent it. What line is that from? So whoever drops that in the chat first is the winner of an Empowered Network Group charcoal detoxifying charcoal mask, which is made with 3 earth clays and activated charcoal. This is a bomb mask, let me tell you. The bomb. I love this mask. I'm so tempted to keep them. But this is some merch that I had. And I said, there's some remaining. I have a few of these left. So we're just going to give it away. All pre-COVID, made in the laboratory. So what movie is this line from? To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. So it's the first one. So I'm going to go back to the read. Give you guys some time with that. I hope everyone had a fabulous holiday. So in case people are lurking and walked away from their PCs or their cell phones or their tablets, because I do that. And thank you for joining me by the fire. Hope you enjoyed how I decorated it so far. Let's give it up for the decorators. So what movie is the line? What movie is this line from? And I love this quote. I love it. To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. I absolutely love that. Let me click on me. Make sure I'm on me for my live. So get some more people in on this. So let me put this on my Facebook as well. So does anyone know what that is from? So this is our first giveaway. Fellas, you're tomorrow. We'll do a bunch of stuff tomorrow. We'll do fellas and ladies tomorrow. So it's for a lovely charcoal mask. Awesome item. So what line is that? What movie is this line from? In here, yep, it can hear it. Someone has to know what line that's from. If not, we'll continue it tomorrow. And we'll just give away a bunch of stuff, pain relief cream and t-shirts. I only have ladies t-shirts. Sorry. And then we'll get new merch before we continue our read of a Charles Dickens. Take a little break here. You guys wouldn't even give this to your girlfriend? Like, nope, she'd expect more, huh? So I have lady t-shirts and I have charcoal mask. Okay, so we're going to continue our read and then we'll see who can guess that. I have to wet the palette. Wet the palette. Okay. The cold became intense. In the main street of the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowings suddenly congealed and turned to misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops were holly sprigs and berries, crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and shell had anything to do. The Lord Mayor and the stronghold of the mighty mansion house gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord's Mayor household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloody thirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and baby sallied out to buy the beef. Foggier yet and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold, if the good Saint Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God rest ye merry, gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more genial frost. Since we had some people just join us, the question is in the chat. What movie is this line from? To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human, and a charcoal mask. A charcoal mask. So that is the giveaway tonight. If you answer that question, awesome. So you'll be the winner, and you could, your P.O. box, awesome. Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. At length the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived with an ill will. Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tactily admitted to the fact that the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put his hat. "You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you think yourself ill used, I'll be bound." The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge, buttoning his greatcoat to the chin. "But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here earlier the next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on Cornhill at the end of a lane of boys 20 times in honor of its being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play a blind man's buff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers, and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suit of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be, that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and have forgotten the way out. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge. The other rooms being all let out as offices, the yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had as little as of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, aldermen in livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon, and then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw the knocker without its undergoing any intermediate process of change. Not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Marley as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That its livid color made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he had half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker. So he said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs slowly, to trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach in six up a good old flight of stairs or through a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say, you might have got a hearse up that staircase, and taking it broadwise, with the splinter bar toward the wall, and the door toward the balustrades, and done it easy. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gaslights out on the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Scrooge's dip. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head. Upon the hob, nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in the dressing gowns, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude across the wall. Lumber room as usual. Old fire guard, old shoes, two fish baskets, washing stand on three legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom, thus secured against surprise. He took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. So we took a little brief intermission, just to state the quiz question. And it is, what line is this? What movie is this line from? To deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. And that is for our giveaway this evening. Next, I'm going to have to make sure I put that in a command so I don't have to stop reading. Oh, here it is. So for our giveaway this evening, we are doing a charcoal mask. So I guess it's more of like a ladies giveaway. So the line is, what movie is this line from? So we play movie trivia with us, with me. So if you would like a charcoal mask, which is awesome, answer this. What movie is this line from? Here we go. Life with Holloway got it. Matrix. So whisper me your P.O. box. I'm sure all you guys have P.O. box. Yep. So we have a winner. So I have to put that. So let me make sure I have. Yes, Life with Holloway. So we're gonna. Oops, I didn't do something today. Nope. Okay. And then we're gonna get back to our read. Oh. Okay, I guess I had to, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. So we just know that. So whisper me or message me in one of the, because I know we're connected. So Life with Holloway is the winner. So I put that in there just so people know we had a giveaway, but you couldn't actually enter a raffle. You had to just answer the question. So that's cool. So I'm gonna put this in here. The winner of the charcoal mask. So yes, we have ladies giveaway tonight. I'm sorry, I didn't even think about that when I put it out there. So all the fellas like left. So we're gonna start the next one now. Oh, will it let me? Yes, it will. So this one is this one. And it's for the t-shirt. And I only have small, medium, and largest left in the t-shirt. So it could be a good present for someone. And it's my not old, it was a campaign I was doing to really kickstart my business again, which was the mindfulness. And it does say Kickstart 2019. So it's a great workout shirt. You can cut it up, wear it. You can, put something else there if you want, put a piece of tape across it. But I have some of these left, so I said I might as well just go ahead and give them away. So I have small, medium, and largest, and it runs a little small. Like, so tomorrow morning, I'm gonna cut this shirt up and wear it, and you'll see it's tight on me. And I wear an extra large. The extra large is tight, so I'm gonna put a large on tomorrow, and we're gonna see what that looks like. So we're gonna pick another line from a movie and see who wins this one. So we're doing 2 giveaways tonight. Awesome, and thank you for joining me and listening to Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. And Monday, this will be our asthma, which there won't be any talking when we get to it. So this one, I kind of put it up as an asthma, and I think all my asthma people left because, well, you're not supposed to have interruptions during it. So the next giveaway is this one, and I will pick a, line during the intermission. I have to give people, I'll give you, I have to open that up to people. So she'll do it. So she'll shoot me a P.O. box. P.O. box. And we'll do the CBD giveaway for the fellas tomorrow. Sorry. And ladies. Anybody can win that one. Okay, so we're going to get back to our read, and then we're going to come back with another What line? What movie is that line from? I need some theme music to go with that. I'm having trouble connecting the music and all that stuff. That's why we're having this little music in the background tonight. So let's get back to a Dickens. So for the t-shirt, so we're still doing giveaways. So we'll do another little brief intermission with the palette. Hopefully, I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday and just so many blessings and everything. Okay. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it. Before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel, the fireplace was an old one, but by some Dutch merchant long ago and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures. There was Cain's and Abel's, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like featherbeds, Abraham's, Belshazzar's, apostles putting off to sea in butter boats, hundreds of figures to extract his thoughts, and yet that face of Marley, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole, if each smooth tile had been a blank at first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one. Humbug, said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose, now forgotten, with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment, with a strange, inexplicable dread, that as he looked, he sank. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loud, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they began. Together they were succeeded by a clinking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain across the casket in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flung open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight across the door. "It's humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed through, when without a pause, it came on through the heavy door, and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up through it, cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost," and fell again. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights and boots, the tassels on the latter bristling like the pigtail in his coat skirts, and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew his was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was a maid, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses, wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now, though he looked the phantom through and saw it standing before him. Though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, which wrapper he had not observed before. He was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Asked me who I was?" "Who were you then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for a shade." He was going to say to a shade, but substituted it as more appropriate. Okay, so we're going to take a break there, and we're going to get to the next trivia question. So let's pick a movie. I want to pick something that everyone knows, of course. Uh, hmm. I think I know it's so we're gonna do quotes from this one. Let me see. Oh, 1 second is bringing up my next quote right now. Oh, uh-oh. All of a sudden. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, so let's look at these right here. Okay, so I think that would be too obvious. This one may be perfect. "I have walked to Timbuktu just to relieve myself." So what movie is that line from? And I may do another one because that might be a little difficult. "I have walked to Timbuktu just to relieve myself." So, I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. So since this is ladies, I may have to do another one. So what's Oop. Okay, so this right here. So what line is that movie from? What movie is that line from? Sorry, I keep thinking of the line. I keep saying, what line is that movie from? So I know I want to call the our little game here. So what line is that movie from? For the t-shirts. For the t-shirts. So again, these run a little small. So I have small, medium, and large left in these. I may have an extra large. I don't know. So for the t-shirt giveaway, what movie is this line from? It is ladies. I didn't realize that. And hey, I think fellas could use a charcoal mask. It's okay. I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. Ah, Key got the t-shirt. Okay, so I can just give you yours. I'll see you. So I'll look to see what sizes I have. So Key got that one. I would have walked to Timbuktu. That's a line though, isn't it? So we're gonna come to the last few minutes of our read. and continue on. Thank you for again for joining me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Mwah. If you have not followed, please follow. Tomorrow we are doing cooking with Crystal Rain, our morning cup of Joe, as we normally do. And we will have giveaways tomorrow as well. And it's going to be giveaways and pancakes. Can't get any better than that. Cooking some pancakes, giveaways, and what's going on. Who were you then? Said Scrooge, raising his voice. You're particular for a shade. He was going to say to a shade, but substituted this as more appropriate. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Can you sit down? Asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. I can. Do it then. Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt in the event of its being impossible, it might involve the necessity of embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he were quite used to it. You don't believe in me, observed the ghost. I don't, said Scrooge. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your own senses? I don't know, said Scrooge. Why do you doubt your senses? Because, said Scrooge, a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror, for the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. To sit staring at those fixed glazed eyes in silence for a moment would play Scrooge felt the very deuce with him. There was something very awful, too, in the spectre's being provided with an infernal atmosphere of his own. Scrooge could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case, for the ghost sat perfectly motionless in his hair, and skirts and tassels were still agitated as by the hot vapor from an oven. You see this toothpick? Said Scrooge, returning quickly to the charge for the reason just assigned and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from him. I do, replied the ghost. You are not looking at it, said Scrooge. But I see it, said the ghost, notwithstanding. Well, returned Scrooge. I have but to swallow this, and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins all my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug. At this the spirit raised a frightful cry, and shook his chain with such dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round his head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, his lower jaw dropped down upon his breast. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. Mercy, he said, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Man of the worldly mind, replied the ghost, do you believe in me or not? I do, said Scrooge. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me? It is required of every man, the ghost returned, that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow man, and travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so. After death, it is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth if, and turned to happiness. Again the spectre raised a cry and shook his chain, wrung his shadowy hands. "You are fettered," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will. In my own free will I wore it. It is patterned strange to you." Scrooge trembled more and more. "Or would you know," pursued the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full as heavy and as long as this, 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on since. It is a ponderous chain." Scrooge glanced about him on the floor, in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. "Jacob," he said imploringly, "old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob." "I have none to give," the ghost replied. "It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other lands of men, nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me." It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his breeches pockets, pondering on what the ghost had said. He did so now, but without lifting up his eyes or getting off his knees. "You must have been very slow about it, Jacob," Scrooge observed in a businesslike manner, though the humility and difference. "Slow," the ghost repeated. 7 years dead," mused Scrooge, "and traveling all the time?" "The whole time," said the ghost. "No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse." "You travel fast?" said Scrooge. "On the wings of the wind," replied the ghost. "You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years," said Scrooge. The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry and clanked his chain so hideously in the dead silence of the night that the ward would have been justified in indicting it for a nuisance. "O captive bound in double iron," cried the phantom, "not to know that ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed, not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in his little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness, not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life opportunities misused. Yet such was I, oh such was I." "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business," cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." He held up his chain at arm's length, as if that were the cause of all his unavailing grief, and flung it upon the ground again. "As this time of rolling year," the spectre said, "I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me?" Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. "Hear me," cried the ghost. "My time is nearly gone." I will," said Scrooge. "But don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray." how it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see me. I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. It was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered and wiped the perspiration from his brow. That is no light part of my penance, pursued the ghost. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and a hope of procuring Ebenezer. You are always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. Thank ye. You will be haunted, resumed the ghost, by three spirits. Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost had done. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? He demanded in a faltering voice. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls one. Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob? Hinted Scrooge. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. When he had said these words, the spectre took his wrapper from the table and bound it round his head as before. Scrooge knew this by the smart sound his teeth made when the jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again and found his supernatural visitor confronting him in an erect attitude with his chain wound over and about his arm. The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step he took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. He beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up his hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms wandering hither and thither in restless haste and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might be the guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to his ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant whom he saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist, or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it, with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. and being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invincible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep on the instant. We will resume the reading on another night. Thank you and many blessings. And I pray ye are not visited by your own ghosts tonight.